Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his leather gloves as he stepped out of the black Mercedes SUV, the morning sun casting long shadows across the pristine gravel driveway of the Riverside Guide Dog Training Center. At 58, he carried himself with the confident bearing of a man who had built an empire from nothing, transforming a struggling cattle ranch in Wyoming into one of the largest livestock operations in the American West. But, today, wealth and influence felt meaningless. "Dad, are we really here?" The voice belonged to his 17-year-old daughter, Emma, who sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders, framing a face that bore an uncanny resemblance to her late mother. What struck most people immediately was how her eyes, despite being unable to see, seemed to hold an extraordinary depth of understanding. "We're here, sweetheart," Marcus replied, his voice softer than the commanding tone he used in boardrooms and cattle auctions. "The facility looks impressive. 3 buildings, lots of open space for the dogs to train." Emma had lost her sight in a riding accident 2 years earlier. A spooked horse had thrown her from the saddle, and she'd struck her head on a fence post with devastating force. The doctors at Denver General had delivered the news with clinical precision: traumatic brain injury resulting in complete bilateral blindness. No surgery could restore what had been lost. For a girl who had spent her childhood racing horses across the open plains of their ranch, who could spot cattle from half a mile away and read the weather and cloud formations, the adjustment had been nothing short of devastating. Marcus had initially resisted the idea of a guide dog. Emma was homeschooled now, rarely left the ranch property, and seemed to have adapted to navigating familiar spaces with remarkable skill. But Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's rehabilitation specialist, had been persistent. "Independence isn't just about getting from point A to point B," Dr. Chen had explained during their last appointment. "It's about confidence, about feeling capable of engaging with the world beyond these safe spaces you've created." A properly trained guide dog can give Emma back a sense of freedom she doesn't even realize she's lost. The conversation that finally convinced Marcus had happened 3 weeks earlier. He'd found Emma sitting on the porch swing, the same spot where she'd spent countless evenings watching sunsets before the accident. She was running her fingers over the carved initials she and her mother had made in the armrest years before. "Sometimes I dream I can still see," Emma had said quietly. "I wake up expecting to watch the sunrise over the eastern pasture. It takes a few seconds to remember, and those seconds are the worst part of every day." Marcus had made the call to Riverside the next morning. Now, as they approached the main building, Marcus found himself studying every detail he could share with Emma later. The facility sprawled across 15 acres of carefully maintained grounds. Young dogs played in enclosed areas while more mature animals walked calmly beside their trainers. The main building, constructed of warm brick and cedar, projected an atmosphere of professionalism mixed with genuine care. "Mr. Rodriguez?" A woman in her early 40s approached them, extending her hand. She wore khakis and a polo shirt bearing the Riverside logo, and her smile seemed both welcoming and competent. "I'm Janet Morrison, the program director. We spoke on the phone." Marcus shook her hand. "This is my daughter Emma." "Hello, Emma." "I'm very glad you're here," Janet said, addressing Emma directly rather than speaking through Marcus, a courtesy that hadn't been lost on the teenager. "Thank you for agreeing to work with us," Emma replied. "I understand you don't usually take clients under 18. Your father was quite persuasive about your circumstances," Janet said with a gentle laugh. "And, frankly, starting guide dog training while you're still young often leads to better long-term partnerships. Shall we start with a tour?" They walked through the facility as Janet explained the training process. Guide dogs began their education as puppies, living with volunteer families who taught basic obedience and socialization. At 18 months, the most promising candidates returned to Riverside for intensive training that could last up to 8 months. "We work with several breeds," Janet explained as they passed a group of golden retrievers practicing in a courtyard. "Labradors, golden retrievers, and German shepherds primarily, though we've had success with standard poodles and some crosses. The key factors are temperament, intelligence, and what we call intelligent disobedience." "What's that?" Emma asked. A guide dog must be trained to disobey a command if following it would put their handler in danger. If you tell your dog to go forward but there's a low-hanging branch that would hit you in the head, a properly trained guide will refuse the command. They visited the grooming area, the veterinary clinic, and the extensive obstacle courses where dogs learn to navigate curbs, stairs, crowds, and traffic. Emma listened intently to every explanation, occasionally asking detailed questions that impressed Janet with their thoughtfulness. The matching process is crucial, Janet continued as they entered the final building. We spend considerable time evaluating not just a dog's abilities, but their personality and energy level. A high-energy person needs a dog that can keep up. Someone who prefers a quieter lifestyle needs a calmer companion. What about experience with horses? Emma asked. We live on a cattle ranch. That's actually something we can work on during training, Janet replied. Many of our dogs do quite well with large animals, though it requires specific preparation. They reached a large room lined with kennels. Most were empty, the dogs were outside training or exercising, but a few contained animals recovering from medical procedures were taking breaks between sessions. Janet led them past several kennels until they reached one near the back corner. I want you to meet someone special, Janet said, her voice taking on a different quality. This is Kaiser. Marcus looked into the kennel and saw a German shepherd lying on his side, his right rear leg heavily bandaged. The dog's coat was predominantly black with tan markings around his legs and face, and, despite his obvious injury, his dark eyes tracked their movement with alert intelligence. Kaiser completed his guide dog training 6 months ago, Janet explained. He was actually matched with a client and had begun the bonding process when an accident occurred. What happened? Emma asked, moving closer to the kennel. He was hit by a car while protecting his handler. A truck ran a red light downtown, and Kaiser pushed his handler out of the way. He saved a man's life but severely injured his leg in the process. Marcus watched his daughter's face transform as she absorbed this information. She had always been drawn to stories of courage and sacrifice, even before her accident. As a child, she'd collected books about war heroes, rescue workers, and anyone who had risked themselves for others. Will he recover? Emma asked. Physically, yes. Our veterinarian expects him to regain full mobility within another month. But there's a complication. Janet paused, choosing her words carefully. The accident traumatized his first handler. The man decided he couldn't continue with guide-dog partnership after seeing Kaiser injured. It's not uncommon, sometimes the emotional impact is too significant. So Kaiser needs a new person, Emma said. In theory, yes. But there's a problem. Kaiser has developed what we call protective hypervigilance. He's so focused on preventing another accident that he's becoming overly cautious, sometimes freezing entirely when he encounters situations that remind him of that day. We're working with an animal behaviorist, but... Janet's voice trailed off, and Marcus sensed there was more to the story. But what? He pressed. The board is meeting next week to discuss Kaiser's future. If he can't overcome these behavioral issues, he'll be retired from guide work. He's only 3 years old, that represents a significant investment in training that can't be recovered. Emma had moved as close to the kennel as possible and was sitting cross-legged on the floor. Can I meet him properly? Janet hesitated. He's been somewhat unpredictable with new people since the accident. Please, Emma said simply. Something in her voice must have convinced Janet, because she unlocked the kennel door. Move slowly, and let him come to you if he chooses. Kaiser lifted his head as the door opened, his ears forward and alert. For several moments, he simply studied Emma, who remained perfectly still on the floor. Then, slowly and carefully despite his bandaged leg, he moved toward the kennel entrance. Hello, Kaiser, Emma said softly, making no sudden movements. I heard you're very brave. The dog approached cautiously until he was just within reach. Emma extended her hand palm up, allowing him to catch her scent. After a moment, Kaiser moved closer and gently touched his nose to her fingers. He's beautiful, Emma whispered. I can feel how intelligent he is. Marcus watched, transfixed, as his daughter and the injured dog seemed to communicate in ways that had nothing to do with words or sight. Kaiser, who Janet had described as skittish and unpredictable, was now sitting calmly beside Emma, allowing her to stroke his head and shoulders. "This is remarkable," Janet murmured. "He hasn't shown this level of trust with anyone since the accident." "Maybe he recognizes a kindred spirit," Emma said, still focused entirely on Kaiser. "You understand what it's like to have your world change in an instant, don't you?" As if in response, Kaiser moved even closer, eventually resting his head against Emma's shoulder. The gesture was gentle but unmistakably protective. "Dad," Emma said without looking away from Kaiser, "I think I know which dog I want to work with." Marcus felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Sweetheart, you heard what Janet said. He's got problems from the accident. Maybe we should look at other options." "What kind of problems exactly?" Emma asked Janet. Janet sat down on a nearby chair, clearly moved by what she was witnessing. "He becomes anxious in traffic situations. Sometimes he freezes when he hears certain sounds, car horns, squealing brakes. And he's developed a tendency to be overprotective, which can interfere with normal navigation." "But he saved someone's life," Emma said. "That doesn't sound like a problem to me. That sounds like a hero who needs understanding." "Emma," Marcus began, but she held up her hand. "Dad, I know you want to protect me. You've been doing it every day since the accident. But I don't need another person trying to keep me safe from the world. I need a partner who understands that sometimes the world is dangerous, but we face it anyway." Kaiser hadn't moved from his position against Emma's shoulder. If anything, he seemed to have relaxed further, as if he'd found something he'd been searching for. "The training process would be different," Janet said slowly. "We'd need to work through his trauma responses while teaching you both to work together. It would take longer than usual, maybe several months." "I have time," Emma replied immediately. "And it sounds like Kaiser does too." Marcus found himself caught between his protective instincts and his recognition of something profound happening before his eyes. This was the most animated and determined he'd seen Emma since the accident. For 2 years, she'd been going through the motions of recovery, learning skills and adapting to limitations. But right now, sitting on the floor with an injured dog who had also lost his way, she seemed to have found something that had been missing. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Janet prompted gently. "What do you think?" Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw something that took his breath away. For the first time in 2 years, Emma looked like herself again. Not the careful, diminished version she'd become, but the fearless girl who had once jumped her horse over creek beds and climbed the highest trees on the ranch. "I think," he said carefully, "that maybe they can help each other figure out how to be brave again." Emma's face lit up with the first genuine smile Marcus had seen since before the accident. Kaiser, as if sensing the shift in the room's emotional temperature, lifted his head and looked directly at Marcus with an expression that seemed almost like gratitude. "There would be paperwork," Janet warned. "Waivers, insurance considerations. The board would need to approve an experimental training program." "I can handle paperwork," Marcus said, his voice regaining its characteristic confidence. "And I've never met a board that couldn't be persuaded to make the right decision." "When could we start?" Emma asked. Janet looked between father and daughter, then down at Kaiser, who had now positioned himself so that he could keep both Emma and the room's entrance in view, a protective stance that was subtle but unmistakable. "Given the unique circumstances, I think we could begin initial evaluations next week. But I want you both to understand this isn't going to be easy. Training typically involves the human learning as much as the dog. Emma, you'd need to come here several days a week for months. Are you prepared for that commitment?" Emma's response was immediate and firm. "I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it." As they prepared to leave, Kaiser remained close to Emma, escorting her to the kennel door and watching as she stood to go. The separation was clearly difficult for both of them. "We'll be back soon," Emma promised, addressing the dog directly. "Next week." Kaiser seemed to understand, settling back into his kennel but keeping his eyes fixed on Emma until she disappeared from view. During the drive home, Emma was unusually talkative, asking detailed questions about the logistics of training and speculating about what life might be like with Kaiser as her partner. Marcus found himself remembering conversations they'd had during long rides across the ranch, back when Emma could see the world they were discussing. "Dad," Emma said as they turned onto the ranch road, "thank you for not trying to talk me out of this. Are you sure this is what you want? The dog has issues, and the training sounds intensive." "Do you remember what you told me after Mom died?" Emma asked. Marcus did remember. Emma had been 12, standing beside her mother's grave, asking him how they were supposed to keep going when everything hurt so much. "I said that sometimes the best way to heal is to help someone else heal. Kaiser needs someone who understands that healing isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't change you. It's about learning to be strong in a different way." As they pulled up to the ranch house, Marcus realized that his daughter had just taught him something profound about courage. For 2 years, he'd been trying to restore her old life, to somehow undo the damage and return her to who she'd been before. But Emma was right, healing meant becoming someone new, someone who could acknowledge the scars while refusing to be limited by them. That evening, as Emma practiced her mobility exercises in the familiar confines of their home, Marcus found himself thinking about Kaiser lying alone in his kennel, probably wondering if the gentle girl with the understanding voice would really return. Something told him that both his daughter and that brave, wounded dog were about to embark on a journey that would change not just their lives, but his understanding of what it meant to overcome impossible odds. The phone rang just as he was heading to bed. Janet Morrison's voice came through clearly. "Mr. Rodriguez, I wanted to let you know that after you left, Kaiser did something he hasn't done since his accident. He ate his entire dinner and spent an hour playing with a toy. I think your daughter might be exactly what he needs." Marcus smiled as he hung up the phone. Maybe, he thought, this was exactly what they all needed. The following Tuesday marked the beginning of what Janet Morrison privately considered the most challenging training program Riverside had ever attempted. Emma arrived at 7 in the morning, dressed in jeans and boots that suggested she was ready for serious work. Marcus had offered to stay for the first session, but Emma had politely declined his presence. "I need to do this myself, Dad," she'd said that morning over breakfast. "Kaiser and I have to learn to trust each other without anyone else in the equation." Dr. Patricia Wells, the animal behaviorist working with Kaiser, had driven down from Denver specifically for this initial evaluation. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and observant eyes, she'd spent 30 years working with traumatized animals and had agreed to consult on Kaiser's case as a personal favor to Janet. The conventional approach would be to rehabilitate Kaiser separately before introducing a new handler, Dr. Wells explained as they gathered in the training room. "But, given the unique bond we observed last week, we're going to try something different." Kaiser entered the room on a standard leash, walking calmly beside a trainer named Miguel. The dog's bandages had been reduced to a smaller wrap around his lower leg, and he moved with only the slightest hint of favoring his injured limb. When he saw Emma, his entire demeanor changed. His ears perked forward, his tail began a gentle wag, and he pulled slightly toward her before checking himself and looking to Miguel for guidance. "Good boy," Miguel said, releasing Kaiser from the heel position. "Go say hello." Kaiser approached Emma with careful dignity, as if he remembered exactly how she'd sat on the floor during their first meeting. Emma extended her hand, and he touched his nose to her palm before settling beside her chair. "Remarkable," Dr. Wells murmured, making notes on her clipboard. "His stress indicators are significantly lower than they've been since the accident." The first hour involved basic evaluation exercises. Emma and Kaiser walked together in the secure indoor training area while Dr. Wells and Janet observed their natural interaction. Kaiser maintained perfect heel position without being commanded, automatically adjusting his pace when Emma hesitated and providing gentle guidance pressure when she veered slightly off course. "Has anyone taught you guide dog handling techniques?" Janet asked. "I read everything I could find online," Emma admitted. "And I've been practicing some of the movements with my mobility cane." "Show me how you hold a harness handle," Dr. Wells instructed. Emma demonstrated the proper grip and arm position with practiced precision. I also researched Kaiser's specific training history. I know he was taught directional commands in both English and German, and that his previous handler was a veteran who used military-style instructions. Dr. Wells and Janet exchanged glances. Most new handlers required weeks of instruction before achieving the competency Emma was displaying naturally. Let's try something more challenging, Janet suggested. Miguel, can you set up the obstacle course? The portable obstacle course included several raised platforms, a narrow passage between pylons, and a section with hanging strips of fabric designed to simulate crowded spaces. It was typically used for advanced training, not initial evaluations. Emma, I want you to give Kaiser a simple forward command and trust him to navigate, Dr. Wells instructed. Don't overthink the process. Emma took the harness handle in her left hand and straightened her shoulders. Kaiser, forward. What happened next surprised everyone in the room. Kaiser began moving with smooth confidence, guiding Emma around obstacles with subtle pressure changes that she interpreted perfectly. When they reached the hanging fabric strips, Kaiser paused momentarily. This element had been part of the accident scene that traumatized him, but Emma's steady presence seemed to anchor him. He moved forward slowly, ensuring the strips wouldn't hit Emma's face, then continued with renewed confidence. Stop there, Dr. Wells called when they completed the course. Kaiser, sit. The German shepherd sat immediately, positioning himself so he could monitor both Emma and the room's entrances. His body language showed alertness without anxiety, protectiveness without hypervigilance. This is extraordinary, Dr. Wells said. Kaiser's demonstrating higher functionality than he showed even before the accident. Emma, how did you know to adjust your pace during the narrow passage? I could feel him hesitate slightly, so I slowed down until he was comfortable, Emma replied. It seemed like the polite thing to do. Over the following weeks, Emma and Kaiser's training sessions became legendary at Riverside. Word spread through the guide dog community about the blind teenager and the traumatized dog who seemed to be healing each other through sheer force of mutual understanding. Their biggest challenge came during traffic training. Kaiser's accident had occurred at a busy intersection, and crossing streets remained his most significant trigger. The training began with recorded traffic sounds played at low volume while Emma and Kaiser practiced basic commands. Kaiser could handle this environment, but his stress was obvious as panting, frequent position changes, constant scanning of the room. Emma noticed his discomfort immediately. Without being instructed, she began talking to him in a low, steady voice, describing everything she could perceive about their environment. I can hear 3 cars passing from left to right, she said calmly. The footsteps behind us are Miguel walking toward the equipment cabinet. That buzzing sound is the air conditioning. We're safe inside, Kaiser. Just practice. Her narration seemed to help Kaiser focus. Instead of reacting to every sound as a potential threat, he began filtering auditory information the way Emma was learning to do. They developed an unusual but effective communication system. Emma would describe what she heard, and Kaiser would confirm or correct her assessment through subtle changes in his positioning. Most handlers learn to read their dog's signals, Janet observed during one session. But Emma and Kaiser are developing a two-way dialogue. It's unlike anything I've seen. The real test came 6 weeks into training when they attempted their first actual street crossing. The intersection chosen was relatively quiet, with good sightlines and predictable traffic patterns. Dr. Wells, Janet, and Miguel positioned themselves strategically around the crossing area, ready to intervene if necessary. Emma and Kaiser approached the corner with Dr. Wells walking several feet behind them. Kaiser's entire body was tense, his ears constantly moving as he tracked every vehicle sound. When they reached the curb, he stopped and sat, but Emma could feel his trembling through the harness. There's a car coming from the left, Emma said quietly. We wait until it passes. Then, we check right. No hurry, Kaiser. We have all the time in the world. The car passed, and Emma gave the forward command. Kaiser stood but didn't move toward the street. His trauma response was overriding his training. Emma knelt beside him, placing her free hand on his shoulder. You saved someone's life here, she said softly. Not here exactly, but at a place like this. You're the bravest dog I've ever met, and I trust you completely. When you're ready, we'll go together." For nearly 5 minutes, they remained at the curb while Kaiser fought his internal battle. Emma continued talking, telling him about the ranch, describing the horses and cattle he would meet, painting a picture of open spaces far from dangerous intersections. Finally, Kaiser stood and looked both directions down the street. He took one step toward the crosswalk, then another. Emma rose and took the harness handle, letting him set the pace. They crossed slowly but successfully, Kaiser maintaining perfect positioning despite his obvious emotional struggle. When they reached the other side, Kaiser immediately sat and leaned against Emma's leg, seeking comfort and offering protection simultaneously. Emma knelt and wrapped her arms around him, both of them shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Dr. Wells approached with tears in her eyes. "That was one of the most courageous things I've ever witnessed from both of you." The training intensified over the following month. Emma spent 4 days a week at Riverside, working with Kaiser on increasingly complex scenarios. They practiced in crowded shopping centers, on public transportation, and in various weather conditions. Kaiser's confidence grew with each successful experience, while Emma's mobility skills advanced at a pace that impressed even seasoned instructors. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly challenging exercise in downtown Denver. Emma and Kaiser were navigating a busy sidewalk during lunch hour when a delivery truck backfired loudly just behind them. The sound was remarkably similar to the collision that had caused Kaiser's original trauma. Instead of freezing or displaying protective hypervigilance, Kaiser immediately moved to shield Emma from the perceived threat while maintaining enough control to guide her safely to the edge of the sidewalk. Once they were out of the pedestrian flow, he positioned himself between Emma and the street, but his body language showed alertness rather than panic. "Good boy, Kaiser," Emma said, recognizing what had just happened. "You protected me, but you didn't let the fear take control." "That's exactly right." Janet, who had been following at a distance, called Dr. Wells that evening with the news. "I think we can officially declare this experiment a success. Kaiser has not just overcome his trauma responses, he's actually functioning at a higher level than before the accident." The final evaluation took place on a crisp October morning. Emma and Kaiser were required to complete a comprehensive test route that included every skill they'd learned: navigating crowded spaces, crossing multiple intersections, using public transportation, finding specific locations, and handling unexpected obstacles. They began at Union Station, Denver's bustling transportation hub. The test route would take them through downtown streets, onto a light rail train, through a shopping center, and, finally, to a restaurant where they would demonstrate proper behavior in a dining environment. Marcus had driven Emma to the starting point but remained in his truck, watching from a distance as instructed. Seeing his daughter walk confidently into the crowded station with Kaiser by her side, he felt a mixture of pride and amazement that took his breath away. The first challenge came almost immediately. The station was packed with morning commuters, and the route to their platform required navigating through dense crowds. Kaiser moved through the chaos with calm efficiency, finding paths Emma never could have managed alone while protecting her from bumping into rushing travelers. Platform 2 for the light rail, Emma instructed when they reached the appropriate area. Kaiser guided her directly to the designated waiting zone, automatically positioning them away from the platform edge. When the train arrived, Kaiser evaluated the gap between platform and car before guiding Emma aboard. He found an appropriate spot where Emma could sit while he remained in proper position beside her, alert but not anxious despite the train's movement and mechanical sounds. The shopping center presented different challenges: unpredictable foot traffic, store displays that created obstacles, and the constant sensory input of music, conversations, and commercial announcements. Kaiser navigated it all while maintaining perfect attention to Emma's safety and comfort. Their final destination was a small cafe where they were required to find an appropriate table, navigate around other diners, and demonstrate that Kaiser could remain calm and unobtrusive in a social setting. Emma ordered coffee and a sandwich, treating the meal as naturally as if she'd been dining out with Kaiser for years. "Excuse me," said a voice from the next table. Emma turned toward the speaker, a middle-aged woman who had been watching their performance. "I just wanted to say that you two worked together beautifully." I've seen a lot of guide dog teams, but there's something special about your partnership.
Emma smiled. Thank you. Kaiser's pretty amazing.
You both are, the woman replied.
I'm actually a mobility instructor at the National Federation of the Blind. Would you mind if I asked how long you've been working together? About 3 months, Emma said.
But it feels like we've been partners forever. When they completed the evaluation route successfully, Janet and Dr. Wells were waiting at the final checkpoint with expressions of professional satisfaction mixed with personal emotion.
Congratulations, Dr. Wells said formally. You've both exceeded every standard we use for guide dog certification.
Kaiser is officially cleared for active duty, and Emma, you've demonstrated mastery of advanced mobility skills.
What does that mean exactly? Emma asked.
It means you're going home, Janet replied with a smile. Kaiser is officially your guide dog, and you're ready for independent travel anywhere you choose to go. That evening, the three of them, Emma, Kaiser, and Marcus, sat on the ranch house porch as the sun set over the western mountains. Kaiser lay at Emma's feet, his head resting across her boots in a gesture that had become his signature expression of contentment. I keep thinking about that first day, Marcus said. When you told me you wanted to work with the injured dog instead of choosing an easier option. I didn't want an easier option, Emma replied. I wanted a partner who understood that being broken doesn't mean being defeated. Kaiser taught me that our scars can become our strengths if we're brave enough to face them. Kaiser lifted his head at the sound of his name, then settled back against Emma's legs with a contented sigh. In the distance, cattle called to each other across the darkening pasture, a sound that had become familiar and comforting to the dog who had found his way from urban trauma to rural peace. Dr. Wells thinks other programs might want to study what you two accomplished, Marcus said.
She believes your approach could help other traumatized animals.
Maybe someday, Emma said.
Right now, I just want to enjoy being free again.
Tomorrow I want to take Kaiser out to the north pasture. I want him to experience what it feels like to run across open ground with no traffic, no crowds, no dangers except the ones we choose. As if he understood every word, Kaiser's tail thumped gently against the porch boards. In 3 months, he had transformed from a hyper-vigilant, traumatized animal into a confident, capable guide dog. But, more than that, he had helped a young woman rediscover her own courage and independence. The moon rose over the ranch, casting silver light across the familiar landscape that Emma navigated now with a confidence she'd never possessed even when she could see. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that the strongest partnerships are sometimes forged in the crucible of shared struggle and mutual healing. 6 months after Emma and Kaiser returned to the ranch, their partnership had evolved into something that amazed everyone who witnessed it. The dog who had once frozen at traffic intersections now confidently guided Emma through environments that would challenge even experienced teams. But their most remarkable achievement was yet to come. It began with a phone call on a snowy February morning. Janet Morrison's voice carried an unusual tension when Marcus answered.
Mr. Rodriguez, I have an unusual request.
There's been a situation here at Riverside, and, frankly, I think Emma and Kaiser might be the only ones who can help. The crisis involved a young German shepherd named Tycoon who had been returned by his handler after just 2 weeks of partnership. Unlike Kaiser's trauma from external accident, Tycoon's problems stemmed from a fundamental mismatch that had shaken his confidence in human leadership. His handler, a businessman from Chicago, had treated the guide-dog relationship as a transaction rather than a partnership, becoming frustrated with Tycoon's cautious nature and ultimately rejecting him as defective.
Tycoon's not defective, Janet explained when Emma and Kaiser arrived at Riverside that afternoon.
He's incredibly intelligent, possibly too intelligent for his own good.
He second-guesses commands when he senses his handler lacks confidence or commitment. With the wrong person, that makes him seem unreliable. With the right person, it would make him exceptional.
Tycoon was housed in the same kennel area where Emma had first met Kaiser. But, where Kaiser had been physically injured and emotionally wounded, Tycoon was physically perfect and emotionally confused. He paced constantly, his dark eyes tracking every movement in his environment with anxious intelligence. He's been returned twice now, Dr. Wells explained. The first handler complained that Tycoon was too slow making decisions.
The second said he was disobedient.
What they didn't understand is that Tycoon was trying to make absolutely certain he was making the right choice before acting. Emma and Kaiser approached Tycoon's kennel slowly. Kaiser, now wearing his official guide dog harness, maintained his professional demeanor while clearly assessing the younger dog's state of mind.
"Hello, Tycoon," Emma said softly.
"I heard you're having some troubles with people who don't understand how smart you are."
Tycoon stopped pacing and studied Emma with remarkable focus. Unlike Kaiser's immediate emotional connection with her, Tycoon's response was more analytical.
He seemed to be evaluating not just Emma's presence, but Kaiser's calm confidence and the subtle dynamics of their partnership.
"What exactly do you need from us?" Emma asked Janet.
"We have a potential handler arriving next week, a graduate student from Colorado State who's writing her doctoral dissertation on animal behavior. She specifically requested a highly intelligent dog, and Tycoon would be perfect for her if we can restore his confidence in human partnership."
"But you want us to help him trust humans again," Emma said. "More than that. We want you to demonstrate what a true partnership looks like. Tycoon needs to see that the right human will respect his intelligence rather than be threatened by it."
Emma considered this while Kaiser positioned himself where he could observe both her and Tycoon. The younger dog had stopped pacing entirely and was now sitting at the front of his kennel, his attention completely focused on the conversation.
"Can we work with him directly?" Emma asked. Janet hesitated.
"That would be highly irregular.
Guide dogs are typically trained with only one human to avoid confusion. But Tycoon's problem isn't training, it's trust. Maybe he needs to see that humans can work together instead of just giving orders."
Dr. Wells, who had been quietly observing Tycoon's reactions, stepped forward.
"Actually, that's a fascinating approach. Tycoon's core issue is his inability to commit to handlers who don't demonstrate genuine leadership.
If he could observe Emma and Kaiser's partnership, he might learn to recognize the qualities he should look for in a human."
The decision was made to attempt an unprecedented training approach.
For the next week, Emma and Kaiser would come to Riverside daily to work alongside Tycoon, demonstrating partnership dynamics while allowing the younger dog to observe and gradually participate.
The first session took place in the main training room.
Emma and Kaiser performed their standard routine, basic commands, obstacle navigation, and problem-solving exercises, while Tycoon watched from a controlled position nearby. Miguel handled Tycoon's leash, keeping him close enough to observe but far enough away to avoid interference.
What happened surprised everyone. Tycoon didn't just watch, he began mimicking Kaiser's responses.
When Emma gave Kaiser a direction command, Tycoon would shift his position as if preparing to execute the same maneuver. When Kaiser demonstrated intelligent disobedience by refusing a command that would have led Emma into an obstacle, Tycoon's body language showed he understood the reasoning.
"It's like he's studying for a test," Miguel observed. "Look at how he's tracking every interaction." By the third day, they attempted something more ambitious.
Emma would work with Kaiser while Dr. Wells handled Tycoon, giving parallel commands to see if the younger dog could apply what he was learning through observation.
"Emma, ask Kaiser to find the door," Dr. Wells instructed.
"Kaiser, find the door," Emma said. Kaiser immediately began guiding Emma toward the exit, adjusting his path to avoid a chair that someone had left in an unexpected position. "Tycoon, find the door," Dr. Wells said simultaneously. Tycoon looked at Kaiser's route, then chose a slightly different path that avoided not only the misplaced chair but also a small wet spot on the floor that Kaiser had navigated around.
His route was actually more efficient than Kaiser's.
"Remarkable," Dr. Wells murmured.
"He's not just copying, he's improving on the technique." The breakthrough came during their most challenging exercise yet.
Emma and Kaiser were asked to navigate a complex obstacle course while Tycoon and Dr. Wells attempted the same route in parallel. The course included multiple decision points where the dogs had to choose between different paths based on their handler's specific needs. Midway through the exercise, Dr. Wells deliberately gave Tycoon a command that would have led them into a dead end, a test of his willingness to demonstrate intelligent disobedience. Tycoon stopped and looked at Dr. Wells, then at Kaiser, then back at Dr. Wells. Instead of refusing the command or reluctantly following it, he did something unprecedented. He moved to the correct path and waited, making eye contact with Dr. Wells as if explaining his reasoning. "He's not just being disobedient," Emma said, having heard the exchange. "He's trying to teach Dr. Wells the right way." "Exactly," Dr. Wells said with amazement. "Titan's not questioning human authority, he's trying to elevate human understanding." The young German shepherd had learned more than navigation techniques from watching Emma and Kaiser. He had learned that true partnership meant both parties working together to achieve success, with the more experienced partner, whether human or dog, helping the other improve. When Dr. Sarah Davidson arrived from Colorado State the following Monday, she found a completely transformed dog. Titan demonstrated not just technical proficiency but genuine enthusiasm for working with humans. More importantly, he showed a remarkable ability to assess his handler's capabilities and adapt his assistance accordingly. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Davidson said after completing her first evaluation session with Titan. "He seems to anticipate what I need before I realize I need it. When I hesitated at a curve because I wasn't sure about traffic timing, he positioned himself to give me a better angle to listen for vehicles. When I was uncertain about a doorway, he guided me to the optimal approach without being asked." The formal matching process took place over several days, but it was clear from the first hour that Titan and Dr. Davidson were ideally suited for each other. She possessed the intelligence to appreciate his analytical nature, while he provided the kind of sophisticated assistance that would allow her to navigate complex research environments. "This is what Titan was waiting for," Emma explained to Marcus that evening. "He wasn't being difficult with his previous handlers, he was holding out for someone who could match his level of commitment." But the story of Titan's transformation had ripple effects far beyond one successful pairing. Word spread through the guide dog community about the innovative training approach Emma and Kaiser had pioneered. Requests began coming in from other programs asking for consultation on difficult cases. Janet Morrison found herself fielding calls from facilities across the country. "We have a dog who was returned 3 times, one caller explained. "Could Emma and Kaiser possibly work with him? Our latest graduate is technically perfect but lacks confidence," said another. "Would you consider having them demonstrate partnership dynamics?" The requests created an opportunity that excited Emma more than anything since her accident. Working with traumatized or difficult dogs appealed to her sense of purpose in a way that simply navigating her own life never could. "What if we started a specialized program?" she suggested to Marcus one evening. "Kaiser and I could help other dogs who've been written off as failures." Marcus had watched his daughter transform from a withdrawn teenager into a confident young woman with a clear sense of mission. The idea both thrilled and worried him. It would mean a lot of travel, he pointed out. Training facilities all over the country. "Kaiser loves traveling," Emma replied. "And I'm not afraid of new places anymore." The conversation led to the establishment of the Rodriguez-Morrison Partnership Program, jointly sponsored by Riverside and funded by Marcus's ranch operation. Emma and Kaiser would spend several months each year visiting guide dog facilities to work with problem cases, dogs who had been returned, animals with trauma histories, or particularly intelligent dogs who needed specialized approaches. Their first official case came from a facility in Oregon. A yellow Labrador named Sunny had been returned by 4 different handlers, each complaining that she was too energetic and distractible. Emma and Kaiser spent 2 weeks in Portland, working with Sunny to channel her enthusiasm into focused assistance skills. The key insight came when Emma realized that Sunny's distractibility was actually heightened environmental awareness. Instead of trying to suppress this trait, Emma taught Sunny's eventual handler how to use the dog's natural vigilance as an advantage in navigating complex urban environments. "Sunny doesn't get distracted," Emma explained to the handler, a young attorney named David. "She processes multiple streams of information simultaneously. When you learn to read her signals, you'll have better situational awareness than any handler I've ever met." The pairing was ultimately successful, with David reporting that Sunny's environmental scanning had helped him avoid everything from construction hazards to aggressive panhandlers. Each case taught Emma and Kaiser new approaches to problem solving. They worked with a German shepherd who had developed separation anxiety, a golden retriever who was too gentle for urban navigation, and a border collie who had been deemed too intelligent for guide work. "The problem is never with the dogs," Emma told a gathering of trainers during a conference in Chicago.
"The problem is that we sometimes try to fit remarkable animals into standard templates instead of celebrating what makes them unique."
Kaiser, now 5 years old and considered one of the most accomplished guide dogs in the country, had become something of a celebrity in guide dog circles. But his greatest achievement remained his partnership with Emma, which continued to evolve and deepen with each challenge they faced together. The ranch had become a destination for guide dog professionals who wanted to observe their training methods. Emma had converted one of the barns into a specialized facility where she could work with visiting dogs in a controlled environment, then gradually introduce them to the vast open spaces that seemed to restore confidence in even the most troubled animals. On a warm spring evening 2 years after Titan's successful placement, Emma and Kaiser sat on their favorite hillside overlooking the eastern pasture. Kaiser was now a senior dog in guide dog terms, but his enthusiasm for work remained undimmed. Emma, at 21, had found her calling in a career she never could have imagined before her accident. "Dad asked me today if I ever miss being able to see," she said to Kaiser, who responded with his characteristic contented sigh. "I told him I can see more now than I ever could before. I can see potential in dogs that everyone else has given up on. I can see the moment when a perfect partnership clicks into place. I can see courage being born in animals and humans who thought they had none left." Marcus emerged from the house and climbed the hill to join them, a routine they had maintained for months. He settled beside Emma, and Kaiser immediately adjusted his position to include the older man in his protective awareness. "Riverside called," Marcus said. "They have a case in Seattle, a golden retriever who was injured in a house fire. The dog recovered physically, but she's afraid of enclosed spaces. They think you two might be able to help." Emma smiled. "When do we leave?" "Next week, if you're interested." "We're always interested in impossible cases," Emma said, scratching Kaiser behind the ears. "Aren't we, partner?" Kaiser's tail thumped against the ground in what everyone who knew him recognized as enthusiastic agreement. In the distance, the first stars were becoming visible in the darkening sky, and, somewhere in Seattle, a traumatized dog was waiting for the partnership that would show her how to be brave again. The cycle would continue, Emma knew, as long as there were animals who needed someone to believe in their potential and humans willing to learn that healing often comes not from avoiding our scars, but from using them to help others find their own strength. Kaiser had taught her that lesson in a kennel at Riverside 2 years earlier, and together they were now teaching it to the world.